2, 1, go. Here we go. We're live here at the NFL Combine. I'm Charlie Goldsmith. I'm here with the Believe Podcast Network. Subscribe to the Believe in Bengals show. Me with Solomon Wilcots. Me looking at some of the bigger storylines of the Combine over the course of the week. And listen, the Bengals, usually it'll be an interesting offseason. It's always an interesting offseason with Burrow. But this is the most interesting Combine I've covered so far from a Bengals perspective. Yesterday, the most interesting press conference from Duke Tobin that I've ever covered. What I was expecting was Duke to come out and say, we like our guys. We respect Burrow's opinion. We want to do a lot of what he does. And it's about, he likes to talk about pie. He likes to talk about puzzles. But that wasn't the message at all from Duke Tobin and from Zach Taylor yesterday. What it was really about was saying everything that Joe Burrow said, co-sign, let's get this done. There was a lot of confidence. There seemed to be the same smirk in the eye of Duke Tobin that Joe Burrow had that night in Dallas when he spoke about a plan in place to keep T. Higgins. The Bengals seem to be all on board on the idea that pay your stars, build a young defense, continue to follow a formula or a vision that they think will get them to the Super Bowl. And now the most important takeaway, though, is obviously none of this is guaranteed. As Duke Tobin said, with these contracts, the proof's going to be in the pudding. And it kind of leaves them without a safety net. It kind of leaves them without a backup plan. The Bengals even more so have pressure on them to get these deals done with Higgins and with Chase in particular in the short term, ideally with Trey. But as he enters his age 30 season, he's in a little bit different of a category of his own. The word of the day yesterday was urgency. I spoke around, I talked around some of these press conferences, talking to GMs and coaches around the league. I asked Eagles GM Howie Roseman, what advantage did it give you guys to get all the deals with Smith and with Brown done as early as you did? Remember, this is the vision Burrow said he wants. Burrow was out at Super Bowl Media Day saying, man, why can't the Bengals do what the Eagles have done? And Howie Roseman said basically, it got us an extra player. The urgency and the opportunity of getting these deals done early lowered the cap hits in the short term and gave the Eagles the flexibility to have more talent. And it isn't that what it's all about at the end of the day. And that creates urgency for the Bengals perspective that Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor both spoke about to get deals done with Higgins and with Chase. Because if they can get these done before free agency, what that does is that lowers their cap hit and that gives them more flexibility to bolster the defensive line, the safety room, more skill position talent, offensive guards, etc. Again, a message from Duke Tobin was kind of, we'll see what happens. We have to make deals that make sense for the Bengals that you typically see at this time of year. What the tone was, the Bengals are invested in a plan of retaining and building around the stars they have in place, particularly because they don't really have a plan B. And now what Tobin set himself up for, to say this again, is if the Bengals don't get these deals done, well, then it is maybe not quite doomsday, because it's never really going to be doomsday when you have Joe Burrow. But it'll be maybe the most significant front office step back that we've seen from this group. And not to call it a failure, but as close to a failure as we've seen from this group. At this time a year ago, kind of my expectation was that, T. Higgins probably had one more year left with the Bengals. We'd see what happens with Trey Hendrickson after he requested a trade. The Bengals were preparing to kind of shift in a different direction. The idea was right now the questions that Duke Tobin would be getting at this combine a year ago, what he thought was questions about Dax Hill contract extension, questions about Cam Taylor-Britt contract extension, questions about Jermaine Burton making the leap and being ready to step into a bigger role, Cordell Volson contract extension. They had all these guys they thought they'd be paying. They thought they'd be able to promote into bigger roles, and all that backfired spectacularly. And that brings them back to where they are now. Do some of these specifics. First, most importantly, the lack of focus on Higgins as a number 2 receiver. Kind of one of the money quotes from Duke Tobin was, I love T. I want T on my team. As long as I'm running a football team, I will want T. Higgins on my team. And with Duke, it wasn't about the positional value, the debate, the flexibility of building a roster, can you have 2 number 1 receivers on the same team? That was basically Duke Tobin saying, heck yes. And, and he really that up over the course of the season with the way that he, in a lot of ways, not carried the Bengals because they did have Joe and Jamar. But when you really do look at the winning plays the Bengals made in 2024, no better examples than how T. Higgins carried the Bengals for a bit in that Denver game in Week 17. I did an exercise a few weeks ago where I went through the biggest winning plays of the season. Higgins was all over the place in that document. And so Duke isn't looking at him like a number 2 receiver. Duke is looking at him as a guy that wins the Bengals games. Duke started yesterday with an opening talking about how irritated he was by, the losing plays and losing moments that the Bengals had. He basically said they blew 7 games and the expectation that they go back to playing at a championship level. And if that's your main thesis statement from Duke Tobin, T. Higgins certainly slides in as a winning player that you'd want that spot. Jamar, Duke Tobin called him the guy. Duke Tobin said he's going to make Jamar the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, which is as upfront as we've heard this Bengals group speak about, these modern negotiations. It's funny. I don't even remember anyone saying that they were going to make Joe Burrow the highest paid quarterback in the league, at which he ended up being. The fact that they're there and that upfront with Jamar does show a bit, I don't want to call it tension, but a bit of the story of these negotiations. Duke at one point saying that Jamar's probably talked to you media guys about his extension stuff more than he has us. Duke dropping the line that Jamar changed his mind in these contract talks last year. It's been a bit of a saga. Jamar says that the Bengals came to him last season and said that they wanted to get a deal done. That's Jamar's side. Obviously, they didn't meet his number or whatever that was. But then from the Bengals side, Duke saying yesterday, it was always a long shot to get a deal done with Chase last year. Those were his words. He said because there was a framework for a super duper star receiver getting an extension after year 3. The framework was Jefferson after year 4. Jefferson's a year ahead of Chase. Now, Jamar's in that spot, and now they've on what that deal would look like. But all Jamar did was give himself leverage with the way he played last season. 1, and 2, because of the cap stuff I was discussing a minute ago. All Jamar or the onus is kind of on the Bengals right now, because if they can get this deal done before free agency, then they'll be able to open up cap space. Jamar doesn't need to get a deal done until August. So the Bengals, kind of do need to, they have more urgency and more at stake here than Jamar does. Worth noting too, the one kind of counterpoint to Duke Higgins' pay your stars plan yesterday was, when you're negotiating with your top 4, Duke said you're also negotiating against the other 49 guys on the roster. And of course, these stars shouldn't give up a penny. But Duke was trying to probably send a message to the stars that, I got to put a winning team around you too. And again, the best guys shouldn't take less. But that was kind of the only selling point he had to Jamar and Trey to really work with him. Another important point. Duke took a little bit of a victory lap for how the Bengals manage their cap. They've gotten a lot of criticism over the years for how they manage their cap. They'll pay guys up front. They don't want dead money on their contracts. They don't do a lot of the creative restructures that you see around the league. They don't throw a bunch of money right now into the team to have like the highest cash flow. Instead, they're more steady in how they spread that out. And what Duke said is, because we do that, now we get to pay our best players. And it is true that they have the flexibility in the cap space now to get this work done. The structure pays off for moments like this. Again, more added pressure to get this work done. Some more on T. Higgins. Their preference to have a long-term deal. Obviously, there's the potential of T. Higgins playing the year on the franchise. But it seems like as they haven't applied the tag on Higgins yet, they've been focused on that side of things. It doesn't sound like T will hit the free agent market, as it would be malpractice to let him walk out the door for a comp pick. But clearly where they're at right now is talking about a long-term deal. Duke Tobin also said, though, we need to keep Jamar, T, and Trey, and also be able to add to the team. So the structure that he says he needs, again, take this for what you're worth, because he hasn't gotten deals done yet, and he has to be able to, and we've established that. But he says he needs a structure that will continue to give him the flexibility to add at defensive tackle, at offensive guard, tight end, other positions like that. Trey Hendrickson. My favorite line he had on Trey was he talks about all the stuff just like plays, super engaged, super passionate. Duke made the point that Bengals are a great fit for Trey. Trey's a great fit for the Bengals. Trey's reaching age 30. Duke said the fact that they're talking to him about a long-term deal that, of course, guarantee him some money, shows that they do have confidence in what the next version of Trey Hendrickson is going to look like. But there was also a lot of talk yesterday about resetting and rebooting this defense and building kind of through a young core. So where does Trey fit into this? Kind of what I see is they like Trey. They'd be interested in keeping Trey. But unlike T, where it's like it feels like they're going to keep T and they're just going to make sure they get it done. Trey, it does feel like the truth is in the details of the negotiations. They're not going to pay probably, and Trey probably doesn't merited right now, the top of the market money for an edge rusher. As good as he is, I wouldn't see that as a wise move for the Bengals. So if he would only take $35 million, you say thank you, but you look in another direction. If a team's offering you a first-round pick for Trey, you probably, a high first-round pick, I'm sure you take that. If they only offer you a fourth-round pick, probably don't. So it's what is Trey willing to accept? What would other teams be willing to offer? What middle ground do you find? And then you're Tobin saying, Trey, you've got a pretty good thing going on here too. So as you keep in mind what your priorities want to be, have that perspective. The other story of the day was Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, of course, looms over everything. I talked to a lot of GMs yesterday about how their star quarterbacks have kind of become assistant GMs, and I don't think anyone's playing that role more than Joe Burrow. They stress that basically Burrow's right, and not just that they've empowered Burrow to speak his mind. They check in with him regularly. He's earned the opportunity, Duke Tobin said, to really be a partner in this process. Zach Taylor has a philosophy that he likes to call plays that the quarterback picks, ranks, really, really believes in, because he says the quarterback will find the extra 5% to make sure he makes that play work. And you can make the same case, and Zach, I asked Zach about this, make the same case roster building. If Joe Burrow sticks his neck out for a certain approach or a certain philosophy, then you don't think when it's week 8 and things are kind of getting rocky, Burrow's going to go above and beyond to make sure that clicks and that works. It was another reminder that the franchise revolves around 9, that he's invested and involved in everything. But now it's up to the Bengals. Now it's on, ownership in the front office's plate to make sure they get the deals done that they're all saying they want. But as Duke Tobin said, the proof is in the pudding. See a question in the comments from Ball Don't Lie with Adi, best pancake spot in Indianapolis. Unfortunately, 1, I'm not a pancake guy. 2, Combine's just more of a grab-and-go breakfast scene. I had a Impossible sandwich wrap this morning. Back to football. Thank you for the question in the comments. Kind of the last thing I'll wrap up with was they're going to build this young defense. There was a reminder of how Chris Jenkins at the Combine last year had an A+ interview. A lot of praise from Jordan Battle, how he hit the ground running to close the year. Duke Tobin talking about how Dax Hill was exploding, he said, before the torn ACL last year. And, however Al Golden wants to use him, whether that's outside corner or in the nickel, he has high expectations for Dax Hill coming off of an ACL injury. Zach Taylor talked about young and hungry corners. It sounds like they're going to roll the dice, roll the ball out with Cam Taylor-Britt, DJ Turner, Dax Hill, Big Newton, DJ Ivy. Good corners are really hard to find because of the other needs. They probably can't afford to go to the top at corner in the way that they need to really upgrade over that spot. So here you go, Al Golden. Here's your number one challenge, task, is getting these corners to all live up to their potential, because we have seen it. On the defensive front, Miles Murphy will get more opportunity, same with Jackson and Jenkins. But Duke Tobin said one of his biggest regrets was not building out a stronger defensive line entering into last season. And when he talks about needing the flexibility and the resources to upgrade the team, I'm sure the defensive line is an area that's highly, highly, highly on his mind, as the Bengals have a ton of cap and could create more with some cap casualties as the Bengals look ahead towards a draft where it sounds like there's an unbelievable core of defensive linemen that can be available between the first and the second round. You look at how these, and Zach Taylor alluded to this, how teams have built these really and versatile lines with a bunch of guys who have maybe 1 or 2 specific strengths, and those can be a real challenge to prepare for. It looks with or without Trey, but in either version, adding more of those versatile types of players, that can go a long way for the Bengals. I'll wrap up with this. Like Zach Taylor called everything the Bengals are dealing with champagne problems because they've done the hard part and they've added their stars. And that leads to a lot of the confidence that they're expressing. But with the confidence, as Duke Tobin said, comes irritation, comes expectation, comes pressure. Burrow's applied pressure. Tobin acknowledged and accepted that pressure. and gave some understanding that the Bengals should get these deals done. Now it's on the front office's plate. Now it's on the ownership's plate to get it done because they're standing out here on a ledge without a safety net. And they have to, I want to say he's their quarterback, but they have to follow the vision that they've promised their quarterback. And if they don't, well, then we'll have a whole lot different style of conversation at this time next year. Thanks for watching. Thank you for commenting in the comment section. Stay tuned to the Believe in Podcast Network and the Believe in Bengals show with me and Solomon Wilcots for more draft content, more Bengals analysis. We're getting started into free agency. The ball's rolling here, and I'm excited about what we're doing. Thanks for watching.